As we're cooking. So this is a precursor for the next course. Um, so the way the rest of this course is going to go is you'll have a final programming assignment that I'll give you today. It's going to be due in 2 weeks because next week is spring break. I'll put the final exam up probably by Friday. You'll have until it's an online exam, but you have to do it within like 3 hours or something like that. It's not designed to take 3 hours. It's designed to take like maybe 1 or 1.5 hours, something like that. But you'll want to make sure that you have 3 hours of time blocked off to sit there and take it, because it's not something you can work on for 15 minutes and leave and come back and do it again. So sometime in the next 2 weeks, you have to find 3 hours you can sit down and take this exam. Okay, so I'll have that up on Friday. So all of that stuff will be to the final project, and the final exam will have to be turned in by 2 weeks from today, which is what, Wednesday
So it's 22nd.
Wednesday the 22nd, correct? Right, because we don't have class that day. That's your off week before your next the session B classes or whatever. So this is our last meeting tonight. But I'm going to give you some kind of some highlights of what you'll run into in the next course, and we're going to do some Android Studio stuff tonight. Just an intro into Android Studio, not super in depth, but kind of queuing off of your casino stuff. Shut up! A lot of babble. Okay. So queuing off your casino stuff, what if, so you went into a casino and you lost $400 in a couple hours, right? Yeah, just gone. Okay, well, what if I told you that you could play at a casino and make money every single day, never lose? That would be of interest, right? That would be awesome.
Awesome. Everyone will be there.
Only people who know how to program. So the skill set I'm going to give you starting today, and then we'll really drill in the next class, which is why I really encourage you to take that next class, even if you're finding the programming difficult, is this gives you a skill set, is being able to write mobile apps for the app stores. So that is writing, we're going to be doing Android in here. If you come to if you're interested in the hackathon that we're going to have on, was it April 8th? Is the hackathon. I encourage all of you to come to that. You just need to contact Professor Josh Locklear and let him know that you want to do that. And then on April 4th, in this room, I'm going to be doing like a little boot camp thing, kind of a 4-hour thing where we spend 2 hours on Android and 2 hours on iOS development, and we'll be connecting an app to a remote database. So kind of giving you a little tiny crash course on knowing enough to be dangerous for the hackathon type thing. But what I'm getting at here is this skill set of being able to write apps and getting them up on the App Store and selling them for 99 cents, let's say, is like going to a casino and always winning. Sometimes you win less than you do other times. But something I've encouraged my undergraduate students to do is challenge yourself to write one app per month. So if you write one app per month that you're going to put up for 99 cents, and I'm not talking about big giant apps, I'm talking about little utility apps, blackjack, tic-tac-toe. Well, maybe tic-tac-toe is too simple, but something like that, something that's not crazy, ridiculous, difficult, but enough to give you some experience, but something you can put up there. So let's say that you got some experience and you wrote an app in a month. And you put that app up in the App Store, and let's just say that the app did enough. Let's say you were doing something that was benefiting you, something that helped your life or something like that, some little utility. And you put it out there. Do you think there's probably other people in the world that could benefit from that utility? Possibly, right? Yeah, fine. You're not going to be the next Angry Birds, probably. So you're not going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars off your little utility app. But let's say that 100 people downloaded your app. 100 people out of the millions of people that are on the App Store. All right? And you get to keep 70% of that. That means in that 1 month, you kept $70. Let's say every single month. Let's say after a little bit. Let's say the number of people that download your app drops to 20 per month. All right? So in 2 years, you have 24 apps out, each of them having 20 downloads per month. All right, so you have 20 downloads per month. You get to keep 70 cents of that, so that's times 0.7. So that's $14 times 24. That's $336 a month that you're getting passively if you never write another line of code. Just sitting there having money deposited into your account. And that's from stupid little utility apps that don't really do that much. Now let's just say out of those 24 apps, what if 1 or 2 of them ends up being pretty popular? Maybe not Angry Birds popular, but what if instead of having 100 or 200, what if you had 10,000 people download your app? Each paying $1. Point is that rather than going and spending a bunch of time sitting in a casino blowing money, you could be spending time building up a skill set that can create a passive income on the side and just keep pumping out apps. Why wouldn't you do that? Sounds great on paper, right? I mean, we have several students that have gone through my mobile application development classes over the last, I guess, 8 years now, that have made legitimate money while they're still in school. I think we had a student make something like $40,000 or $50,000 in a year just writing software from their dorm room. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to be you. But the point is, with a minimal amount of effort, basically something you probably would do for free just to get experience to get a job, you might accidentally make some free money on the side. But I'll tell you what, it's not going to cost you money. Right? You're not going to lose $400 in the casino in a night. So this skill set, I think, is a invaluable skill set. Now, some of you are going to go through the Android stuff and then take the next class and then come out and say, you know what, fine, I get it. Somebody could do this. It's just not for me. That's fine. So then go lose all your money at the casino. Hope for the best. Maybe play the lottery. And that might be more your speed. You know, because the lottery, there is no skill to it. At least casino, there's a little skill. But apparently you weren't very good at it. That's what I'm thinking.
I went a lot of times before.
Oh, so you've gone to the casino before. So you assume that your past success was going to translate into making money this time.
I didn't go for a while.
Because you ran out of money. As soon as I had money again, I ran right back to the casino. I put $500 all on one hand. You said you bet $100 on a single hand?
Yeah. So I put $120 on one game in the last game. So when I was coming out, I lost $380. So I have $120 left. I just put all 120 on one hand.
Okay.
I got a blackjack with them. I was lucky. I got an ace and I got a 10.
Okay.
So I got a blackjack.
So what did you make?
Basically, at the end, I lost around $260. Basically.
Oh, so that 400's turned into 260 because you got your money back from that one win. So you lucked out. I get it. You know what I do with the casinos? See, I don't really gamble, but when you go to a lot of these casinos, they bring you free drinks, right? As long as you look like you're busy. So I park myself in front of one of those nickel slot machines. I throw a $20 bill in there. Okay, well, I usually put it on cards now, right? And I just pull the handle often enough, especially when one of the servers come around, to make sure I'm looking active. And by the end of the night, maybe I've lost $3 or $4 and gotten my money's worth. Cash out, move on with life. True story. One time I was a high roller. We were in Vegas, and I really don't gamble at all. So like the story I just told you is true. I mean, but my wife was shopping in one of the shops at I think Caesar's Palace that has like the mall built into it, and they had slot machines out like in the hallway of the mall. You know, so I guess the husbands could go sit there and do something while the wives are shopping. Um, Stereotypical, but I was sitting with a lot of other husbands, so it seemed to be that the truth that kind of lined up. I was totally a high roller. I think I won like $75 on one of the nickel machines by accident. Yeah. So I think by the time all was said and done, I was up like 60, 68 bucks, 69 bucks, something like that in Vegas. Because you only have to pull the handle every now and then to keep them coming back with drinks. Sometimes when there's like something that goes on around you, like somebody hits a jackpot near you, then you can get up and like pretend like it was you, that they think you're really active into it. Start giving people high fives. That's the international symbol for I need a refill. All right. So let's look at the Android tools here. And I'm going to give you kind of a crash course in it tonight. We're not going to go too terribly deep. I'm just going to give you enough to kind of be able to do the final homework assignment, because I want you to kind of use the tool, but understand that this is a very cursory introduction. So probably the best way to start for most of you is going to be to go to developer.google.com. And it's going to take you to Google's developer site, and you click on Android, this guy over here. And by the way, when I do the crash course thing on the 4th, we're going to be hooking an Android and an iOS app up to Firebase, which is Google's real-time database. So that's that. I would encourage you to come to that April 4th thing as well, just to kind of see how that stuff works. Did I? I don't know if I did or not. I just did. There's signs up around here, like right out there is like April 4th boot camp. I think you're supposed to email Professor Josh Locklear about it to sign up or something. It doesn't cost anything. I'm just teaching it. I'm teaching it and I'm running the hackathon. I'm not in charge of organizing stuff. I just program. So they put me in front of audiences and I write code. And I don't do any of the other stuff because the other stuff is boring. Coding is fun, right? I mean, haven't we all enjoyed our time on these homework assignments? And yeah, I mean, what? It's like playing this video games. This is crazy. All right, so you'll go to developer. Well, it ends up being developer.android.com once all is said and done. Click on develop down here. And we're going to go down here to this thing called Android Studio. All right, so the tool we're going to use for writing our software is something called Android Studio. Think of that, and it actually used to be Eclipse. So in the early days of writing Android apps, you would actually download Eclipse and then use the Android plugin for Eclipse. Well, now what they did is they basically took Eclipse, which is an open source product, and turned it into their Android IDE. So they call it Android Studio. It's effectively a googly looking Eclipse with the Android GUI developer built into it. Okay, we'll look at it today, but you click on Android Studio here. You download this guy. It's for Mac or PC, so it doesn't matter. It looks like it's about 400 megabytes. I already have it on here, so we're not going to have to do the whole download thing. You might find it helpful. Let's see. Do they have... Here's some videos. Let's just see if any of these videos. If I were you, I would look at some sort of tutorial video. Android Studio setup. Android Studio tutorial for beginners. That's a year ago. That's probably new enough. Yeah, I bet you this one will be decent. How to install Android Studio 2.2 on Windows 10. Anything that's relatively recent, within the last 12 months will probably get the job done. And the real problem is, and let me just kind of show you by example, when you open up Android Studio, I do have it on here, don't I? Oh, there it is. When you open up Android Studio, almost every time you open this application, there's going to be an update. It's ridiculous. I hate it. Okay? But the first time you install it, you have to run because when you download Android Studio, it's only 400 megabytes or whatever. So what you're getting is kind of the core application, effectively like Eclipse with a couple other things plugged into it. But then what you need to do is you need to download all of the current version of Android, the Android OS, and then also something called Haxm, H-A-X-M, and it'll take you through that. It's all part of that beginning tutorial. But the Haxm piece is very important. If you don't have Haxm when you launch your Android emulator, it'll take a month. With Haxm, it takes like 15 seconds. So, and I'll show you here in a few minutes, we'll run one, but it's not hard to install. You just need to basically set aside an hour. You don't have to be sitting in front of the computer the whole time, but if it says you need to download something, just keep hitting next and hit install. Don't cancel anything or don't say later. When you first do it, install everything. All right. If it suggests it, install it. All right. You only need the latest version of Android. You don't need to go back and purposely install the last 20 versions of Android. Just the one it recommends, download that. So if it doesn't recommend it, don't worry about it. You don't have to do extra stuff. But during that installation, it'll say here, download the current Android tools, software development kit stuff, and then download Haxm. Haxm's the important one. Well, the Android Studio is really important. It's vital. The Haxm one, you'll be upset. And before Haxm existed, I used to have students just keep their Android emulator open for just weeks at a time because it took so long for it to launch. It was ridiculous. But you'll see it's significantly quicker now. But as an example here, see there's a platform and a plugin update for Android Studio. If I click update here, notice there's from current version is 2.2.3. There's a new version 2.3 that's 118 megabytes. I probably will get this maybe tomorrow or something, but just because I don't know how fast it'll install, let's not burn time doing that. What you see here is going to be very, 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 very similar to what you'll be viewing. Okay. But basically expect that Android Studio will have updates often. Some of the updates are just slight little things. Sometimes it's I run Android Studio multiple times per week. All right. Let's say this week I probably had this thing open 3 times. And there's an actual major version upgrade from 2.2 to 2.3. I mean, it's that often there's updates. It's ridiculous. That's kind of more of Google's thing. So I'm just going to say remind me later. Over the time you do, and really the thing is in the graphical user interface editor, and I'll show that to you. It used to be unusable. Now it's just crappy compared to iPhone's version, but it's pretty good now. It used to be really bad, and I'll show you when we get into it. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to close this current project I have open. So when you first come into Android Studio here, you'll see something like this. Okay, and this is after you've done all your update stuff initially. When you first launch it, it'll take you through the thing. Set aside an hour, all right, to do it around dinner time or something, so you can check back in on it, just hit next and let it just keep doing its downloading, cooking thing, okay, to get everything installed. And this is something that you'll want to have for the hackathon anyways, depending on if you're on a team that's doing iOS stuff or Android stuff. And the thing I'll point out for the hackathon is you'll learn a lot in that 12-hour period if you're at that hackathon. You don't have to be an accomplished or competent programmer to come to that. All of you have enough skills to be part of a team there. What we do is we group people up with a couple of advanced programmers and then a couple of new programmers who aren't going to contribute a whole lot, but know enough to be dangerous sometimes. So many of you are going to be in that group where you're a beginning programmer, but you want to learn more, but you don't even know where to start to write something big, right? You know, the little text-based blackjack was a big deal, you know, for a lot of us. So, you know, the hackathon is a good opportunity to be with other people that are struggling with some of the material similarly to you, right? You take one of our seniors and undergrad who've been programming for 4 years or something like that. You know, they're going to be more competent at programming than most of you are, but they're going to still run into problems. You know, they're going to still have issues, so they're not going to have the experience that maybe I have. And a lot of times it's easier to learn from somebody that does run into little bumps. So sometimes I introduce little problems in the code so I could show you something when it breaks or something like that. But I think working with your peers is often more educational than just watching somebody who's done it for a long time just do it. Watching somebody who's done it for a long time maybe helps you kind of reconcile that it's attainable. Like, oh, okay, somebody could just sit down and write software. That makes sense. This whole idea of writing an app a month, like that's plausible that a human being could do that. But sitting down with your peers and kind of seeing how they process through things, I think is really invaluable compared to sitting in an audience, because after 2 or 3 hours, you're burned out. So, and this is going to be 12 hours, so we're going to have caffeine. Bring this guy there. Got to work for that. But in any case, I strongly encourage all of you to save the date and come to that thing. It's a skill set that I just can't emphasize enough that you want to have in the IT industry, is the programming skill set, even though I realize that most of you don't like it. Okay, you want to have it. It'll help you support your gambling addiction, because you'll make more money with the programming skill set. You'll be more employable. It's so important. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start a new Android Studio project. Okay, similar to starting a new Eclipse project. And like I said before, Android Studio used to be Eclipse. You know, then they just integrated it into their own thing. I'm not sure exactly what they did behind the scenes. You know, how much of the old Eclipse is still there, I don't know, but it feels a lot like Eclipse to me. You won't see huge differences, other than the fact that our apps now will have an interface. You know, not stupid text stuff, right? But with great power comes great responsibility and slight difficulty. Before, we're all used to typing, right? So like, I'm going to say, hey, player one, do you want to take another card? All of us could write that interface. Well, now you're going to have to deal with buttons and text boxes and stuff like that. And it all sounds great on paper until you actually have to do it. Then you're like, oh, I thought programming was bad. Now I have a whole interface I have to maintain. I promise you, once you get used to it, it's not that bad. All right, so we'll start a new Android project. Oh, definitely. I mean, we're going to be designing a UI tonight. I'm still in the process of deciding what we're going to write. In fact, we probably should make that decision right now. Let's see here. Do we maybe want to write tic-tac-toe in Android? We need some game. Connect 4 is fine. I'm just not sure it's going to illustrate anything more than I was going to illustrate anyways. What I'm ultimately going to have you do for your homework is create a dice roller. So to give you the backstory on that, let's just see if I can find it on here. D20 Gaming Dice. Usually comes up as one of the pictures here. There we go. See that guy there? That is D20 Gaming Dice. That is my first app that I wrote on the App Store. Literally, that's my app that you're looking at there. So that was on the App Store, a decade ago? It was the first app I ever wrote for iOS when it first came out. So this was out in the App Store day one. And I wrote it, I mentioned a little bit ago that, as students, when students are trying to come up with their project ideas, I encourage them to write something that helps them. So me and a couple of my students were going to play Dungeons and Dragons, the dice roller, like playing, where you usually have dice and you roll and say, oh, I'm going to attack this guy and I hit him for 8, that kind of stuff. Well, I decided, okay, well, I wanted to learn how to do iPhone programming stuff anyways, because this new App Store thing sounds like it's going to be a cool idea. Now the developers can actually put stuff out there, when before that you used to have to go through, like, how do you get a piece of software on the shelf at Best Buy, which was almost unattainable. Now anybody can write software and put it up in the App Store. So I figured I needed an excuse for that. And I decided, well, I just moved up here, so from Illinois, and my dice were still packed up. So I sat down and I wrote this app and I wasn't familiar with the language behind it. It's a language this one's written in. It's called Objective-C. So I had to learn the language too. So I probably spent a total of probably 4 hours or so on this app, kind of teaching myself how iOS development works, and just, this was my crash course app on it. Put it up in the App Store for 99 cents. This guy also had a big brother. It was D20 Gaming Dice Pro. And see, the basic version of this guy, I could hit like 4d6, for instance. So you'd hit a number over here, then you hit one of these dice. So 4d6 is when you roll that dice, it's going to roll 4d6 dice. So a 6-sided die is going to give you, when you roll it, it's either a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or 4 or 5 or a 6, right? It'll roll that 4 times, and it shows you what those rolls are. All right, so if I was trying to let's say I had to roll 4d6 damage because I'm a wizard in the game and that's my fireball damage or something like that, I would do roll 4d6, I'd hit roll, and it gives me the amount of damage I did. So I don't have to carry dice around. I have the app right with me. All right, so we would call this a stupid little app, right? This looks like crap, doesn't it? Are any of you impressed by this app? Well, if you measure it against the apps you see in the App Store now, does this guy look like anything special? Now, so before I kind of gave you some math as to, how much apps can make and stuff like that, right? Because now there's a zillion apps up on the App Store. Well, this guy and his big brother were on the App Store the day the App Store went live. There weren't a zillion apps in the App Store. Everybody and their brother downloaded every app on the App Store. How much do you think I made off this app and his big brother? This one was 99 cents. The other one was $1.99. And I made all the profit in the first 7 months. And it actually just got taken off the App Store about 3 months ago. Apple went through and cleaned house and said that apps that had old interfaces that didn't live up to their new standards got yanked. So I wrote this for 4 hours one time a decade ago. I hadn't touched it since. What do you think this generated in terms of income? Take a stab. Couple of $1,000? Yeah, maybe in the first couple hours. Made over $3 million off this app and its brother. Nothing special about it, is it? What was special about it was the timing. Everybody and their brother wanted every app that was on the App Store. Because when the App Store first went live, there was 130 apps on the App Store. So everybody downloaded all of them, or a lot of them. So I'm sure there were great-great-grandmothers who had my dice roller on their app for no good reason, other than they hit the buy now button. Now that doesn't really happen too much anymore. You got to be the next Angry Birds, which is why I encourage people to write, an app a month and get a residual income. But up until this past year, this app was still probably making me $7 or $8 a month. 7, 8, 9, 10 people would download it per month. Just passively. They were looking for a dice roller. This guy was the cheapest or something like that. And that's a decade later. That's not that many people, but that's Subway, right? That's a sandwich at Subway, or or I guess a cheap hand of blackjack, or maybe it's an Uber ride to the casino. But in any case, the proof is kind of there that it's not guaranteed to make you a lot of money, but it is guaranteed not to lose you money. So if you gain this skill set and start writing software like this, and it becomes something that you do, even just as a hobby, you will always make money. It's a stock market that always goes up. Sometimes it goes up more quickly than other times. It's at least a stock market that never goes down, right? Is, I guess, the punchline. So sometimes you won't sell any. Nobody wants your stupid app, and then you go write another one and move on with life. Now, the pro version of this allowed you to do things like 2d6 plus 3d4 plus 5. Kind of almost like build a calculator out of it. So it kind of created a math formula, kind of like our process expression that we wrote in our second assignment, or third assignment, whatever it was. Remember that guy? So literally it was process expression was the code behind that allowed you to generate these big expressions. All right. And then the percentile thing just rolled between 1 and 100. So ultimately what you're going to do for your homework assignment is build this app. Okay? You're going to build this app. So you'll be able to say, oh, for my homework, I wrote a $3 million app. It's a true story. Okay. Now, 98% of that was because of timing. I mean, if you wrote this app today, you would not make $3 million off of it. You'd make like $3 off of it. Okay. But it's not that difficult to write. All right. So just in terms of functionality, what we have is kind of a calculator type interface over here, right? So this calculator interface, when you hit one of these buttons, it changes this number out front here. Then over here, you have the different dice. This is a 4-sided die, a 6-sided, an 8-sided, a 10-sided, a 12-sided, and a 20-sided. So if I hit D8, this D6 turns into a D8. If I hit a D10, this turns into a D10, D12, D12. So it's always going to be this many of these guys. That makes sense? So the default version of this doesn't let you do the whole calculator thing. Now, having said that, if you wanted to create a big expression, that wouldn't be that big of a deal. Okay? But I want to keep this first app relatively simple because you are also crash coursing on Android Studio. All right, so does everybody understand the functionality of this guy? Okay. So this is a 4-sided. So this will, when you roll a 4-sided die, I think it looks like a pyramid. It'll be a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. This is a 6-sided, a 1 through 6. This is an 8-sided, a 1 through 8. This is a 10-sided, 1 through 10. This is a 12-sided, a 1 through 12. This is a 20-sided, a 1 through 20. This is the percentile, so a 100-sided, a 1 to 100. Okay? So when I put in 4d6 here, so I hit 4, then I hit d6, this shows me what I'm going to do. Then when I hit roll, it rolls a d6 4 times. Here was the first roll, here was the second roll, here was the third roll, here was the fourth roll. And then it added them all up and gave me my result. Now, the reason it's important not to just give me the total is some dice games require you to know what the individual rolls were. Because sometimes you throw out the lowest roll or something like that, or you only take your 2 lowest for some reason. Instead of throwing it out, those are the ones you keep. So this gives you the total if you're interested in the total, but you do need to roll the individual dice. So what does this mean? This means generate a random number between 1 and 6. Generate another random number between 1 and 6. Generate another random number between 1 and 6. Generate another random number between 1 and 6. That makes sense? Display them all. Probably need to store them someplace. Then you can display them and ultimately add them all up and show the result here. So you can make this exact interface if you want. In fact, if you want me to, let me copy this image. And I can do that because it is my image. So I should be asking for royalties from, although I stole those graphics off the internet. I did. I didn't draw those dice or anything. This is 535. So I'll go ahead and so you might make your interface look something like that. You could pick your own what your dice look like or whatever. It doesn't have to be identical to this, but something along these lines. Okay, so when you click on percentiles, this rolls 1d100. It gives you a number between 1 and 100. So the percentiles button has nothing to do with these guys right here. Percentiles just gives you a quick number between 1 and 100. Roll always does whatever this guy says. Okay? This calculator side here controls what gets typed into this little part right here. Clear will empty it out. Which one of these buttons you click on dictates whether this is a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, or D20. And then the roll button does what this says. Make sense? Okay. So that's what's your homework. Go ahead.
The roll button rolls the dice and does the addition.
Correct. Roll button, when I hit roll, it shows you this stuff up here and does the addition. And if I hit roll a second time, it's going to roll 4d6 again, which would very likely give me different rolls at a different total. Okay? So that's going to be your homework that's due 2 weeks from today. What I'm going to do here for the remainder of class is I'm going to give you a crash course on Android Studio. How to respond to button clicks, how to build simple interfaces. So I'll kind of show you some things that are like the aspects of what you'll have to do for this. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm not actually going to write this, but I'll kind of show you how it works. Okay. So we're going to call this guy D20 Gaming Dice. Suggesting I make that an uppercase letter. Go ahead and hit next. All right. Usually the stuff here is the default is fine. What it's asking is what's the minimum software development kit you're developing for. So what this usually says is it says if you choose API 15, which is nowhere near the newest is API 25. All right. So the newest version of Android is version 25. Version 15 is what they called ice cream sandwich from several years ago. So they're saying if I design my app to work on stuff that was available from ice cream sandwich on, okay, or stuff that was only available on ice cream sandwich, then my app will likely run on the most number of devices. So notice here it says this will run on 97.4% of all Android devices out there. Where if I chose to write it for the newest, latest, greatest Android Studio, or Android, this will run on less than 1% of devices. Okay? And this has always been kind of the problem with Android from a lot of people's perspectives is the fragmentation. You know, so I think I've taken a show of hands in here, half of us or so are Android users, right? Okay, but I bet you among those Android users, we have several different versions of Android that your phone is running. Because Android has never been very practical about providing updates because Google makes the software, makes the Android software, and a whole bunch of other people write the hardware, create the hardware. So now you have this software that has to be mutilated to run on these different pieces of hardware. So it's hard for Google to say, okay, we'll just go ahead and update everybody's. Each of those device manufacturers has to take the open source current version of Android and change it to work on their hardware, which a lot of them don't do. A lot of them just say, oh, well, the current version of Android that's running on the device seems to be fine. And they just let it go. All right. So typically it will go ahead and choose the best version of Android to hit the most devices. So unless you're doing something very specialized where you need to use some feature that was introduced more recently in the Android software development kit, most of your utility apps and stuff like that are going to use stuff that's been around for a long time. All right. So typically, the default settings for this are fine. Similarly, we're designing for a phone or a tablet, those types of devices, as opposed to a watch or Android TV or Android in your car. So if you wanted to design for one of these other things, you could, but the default, again, is phone, tablet, and ice cream sandwich. Sound good? All right. So most of the time, you can just hit next here. All right. Now, when you get to this screen, some of the tutorials you might see might have you start off with a basic activity. So here's kind of an activity in your app, and I'm not going to get into too much detail on this right now just because we're on a time crunch. I promise you take the second class, you'll get the full Android treatment. Okay? But for right now, imagine that an activity is a screen in your application. So every screen in your app is governed by an activity. It just so happens that the app you're writing for your homework is a one-screen app. So you only have one activity. So this really isn't all that important. But some of the tutorials you might see might have you use this thing called a basic activity. I hate it. It creates it makes interface design even worse, in my opinion. I always use empty activity no matter what I'm doing. I like to control my workflow. So I use the most empty activity that's still an activity as opposed to no activity. All right, so I like to create an empty activity, which then sets up the environment so that I don't have to do any extra work to get my app to launch. Okay, because if you choose no activity, then you have to go and do some extra steps to kind of let Android Studio know about what your first activity is for your application. We're building a single screen application. It seems to me that all applications would have at least one screen in them. So you're usually fine by choosing empty activity. All right, so I always choose empty activity. Some of these other ones will do some stuff for you that might, for instance, a login activity. There might be aspects that occur very, very often on login screens. So it kind of does some of those things for you. Don't worry about that right now. For right now, everything's an empty activity. All right, so we'll go ahead and hit next. Now, the default name for your first activity is almost always main activity. You'll see that in all sorts of tutorial videos and stuff like that. You can name it whatever you want. Now, let me actually check something here real quick. I think I did talk about that. Did I talk about MVC in here? When we were talking about the introduction of our web languages and the problem, I think I did, the problem with PHP. Model view controller. It's potentially the time I was sick. So remember when we were talking about the history of our languages? And we talked about the difference between these languages over here. So Perl, PHP, Ruby, Python. When we talk about PHP and the problem with PHP, we would have said that one of the issues with PHP, where's my web languages? Okay, I'm guessing it was in the video that day I got sick, which you still should have watched, but but in any case, I'll just talk. There was. We did talk about it right there. So we talked about this idea of design patterns. So this is a proposed good solution to common problems. And one of the design patterns is this thing called MVC, the Model View Controller, which just says it's a good idea to separate your code from your interface. Technically, there's a third piece to that. It says also separate your models, your database from that as well. But for us, let's just think about a code from interface. Keep those two things in different places and come up with some way of having the two sides talk to each other. All right? Android Studio has an implementation of MVC. MVC does not reference the implementation. It represents the idea. Okay? It's the idea of having one place to put your code and another place to build your interface, and then providing a mechanism for them to talk. So right here, my code is going to live inside the activity. my interface will live inside of this layout file called activity main. All right, so every screen in my app will have, I'm going to say it, the true answer here is every screen in my app will have at least one activity and at least one layout file. For right now, just let me say every screen in your app will have one activity and one layout. Okay, you'll learn more later, but for right now, that's the case. So the activity is where our code goes. The layout is where our interface goes. All right, and then those two need to talk to each other. So we're gonna have to learn today how Android handles that MVC. And it's not difficult. We just have to be aware of what's happening. Somehow our code needs to become aware of what's happening on our interface. For instance, if I have a label on my interface that I want to put something in, I need to somehow get that guy accessible in code. So I need to connect these two guys together somehow so that I can tell this guy to set his text to hello. Okay? So we're going to be exploring MVC here. So again, the default's probably fine. Let your activity name be main activity. You can name it whatever you want, but that's a pretty common thing. And then our layout file will be activity_main. Good enough. All right. Go ahead and you can leave these checkboxes checked. You know, the generate layout file says, yes, go ahead and do MVC for me. The second one says use backwards compatibility with this thing called app compat. That way your app will run on older versions of Android, because some older versions, newer activities are a little bit more memory efficient. They can do more, do more tricks and stuff like that than older ones used to. So you kind of have your old school app compat activity, and then you have your kind of your new full powered activities that if you choose to go with that, it's only going to run on the newest devices. So backwards compatibility you almost always want turned on. So again, the default's fine. So we'll go ahead and hit finish, and it's going to do its thing. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, now one thing I'll just kind of point out, because sometimes Android Studio can act a little quirky. If you ever have a whole bunch of stuff that still shows up in red on here, like you saw it was red a second ago, and then it finally went away, and down here it said Gradle build finished. All right, so Gradle is this auto building tool that all Android Studio projects are governed by, let's say. And it does the job of making sure all your layouts are married to your code behinds, and it actually maintains this file called r.java. And I'll introduce that to you here in a few minutes. But the important thing for us is if Gradle doesn't do its job, we get a lot of red stuff. Okay, usually the best way to fix that, and it doesn't happen often, it keeps happening less and less often as they keep making updates. So this product has become significantly better than it used to be. But the best fix is usually shut down Android Studio and relaunch it. And then usually Gradle will run again. You can do some stuff up here and like build and say clean project or rebuild project that kind of forces it to happen. But typically just closing it and reopening it lets it go through its startup cycle again. So between that and always making sure your Android Studio is up to date, probably your best way of keeping it relatively healthy. But there are quirks with Android Studio, so as you start working with it, you'll kind of learn some of the nuances of it, which is also why I'm starting you off with this first app is a pretty easy app in terms of, it's a whole lot of the same stuff, right? Can't you imagine that when you're in here, whether you hit the button 7 or button 8 or button 9, or they all do the same thing, right? They're all tacking something on to this number right here. All right. So same thing. All these buttons do kind of the same thing. Just this button sets it to D4. This sets it to a D6, so on and so forth. Okay. So this is my activity. This is my Java code. Remember, it's a good idea to keep your code in one place and your interface in another place. Here's my interface. Now, if you ever lose track of that, it gets closed or something like that, Okay, because this is just like Eclipse where your files live over here, and when you open something, it shows up over on this side. So if I double click on main activity, it pops up over here, just like in Eclipse. Well, if I come into my resource folder, it's over here. So this is like an Android directory structure. This is what all Android projects look like. And inside of here, we have a folder called layout. And inside of there, we have this thing called activity main, XML. This is the layout. This is our interface for our code. Okay? So that's how we can get that guy back. And I'm going to go ahead and move that over there for a second so this looks a little bit bigger. And actually make it look, we'll bring this back here because we're going to see this here in a second. All right, but let me go over to my main activity first. Notice here, kick this down a line, that when this activity is first created, this is like a part of the life cycle of an activity. Not that important for us at this exact moment, just understand that this is when the screen is born. Okay? The important thing that happens for us right here is this code marries himself to that layout file. It's saying, I want my content view, I want my interface to be, and there's a little imaginary this dot in front of that. You know, I like to put this dot in front of everything, but it's not required. So I'm saying I want this is an instance of main activity, which is an app compat activity. It's one of those. It's an Android application screen. That's what an activity is, okay? So I want this screen to set his content view, his interface, to be activity main, that guy. Okay? If you go and look at activity main, right now, it says hello world. Right? So here's our whole activity. I'll talk more about this in a few minutes. But on here, there's a single label. It's called an edit text that just has the word hello world hard-coded in there. Okay? So that's what my app currently looks like. This is your default hello world app. I'm not going to touch anything else yet. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to hit play. All right, so I want to run my application just like we would in Eclipse, but something different happens. In Eclipse, it always ran to the screen. Here, when I hit run, it's going to start my, it's going to ask me to choose my deployment target. Now, initially, you probably do not have one here. So what you would do is create a new virtual device. You would select your device from this list. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go through this. I would choose one of the Nexus devices. Nexus 5 is a decent idea. So probably take notes on this just as a hint. This will make your life easier on more than one laptop, because some laptops don't have 64-bit processors or have an AMD chip, which makes them work a little weird. So choose Nexus 5. Go ahead and hit next. Now it's going to ask you what version of Android do you want to have on here. Get the newest version, it's fine. You're writing your code for an older version of that, but your newest version is backwards compatible, so it'll work. But what I would strongly encourage you to do, and it probably will not have this by default, it will not have the x86 version of the latest API. So you'll probably have to hit download on it. Okay? I've already done that. So it's choosing what version of Android Studio do you want to have on here. Choose the x86 one. Many of you will be fine choosing the x86 64-bit version. But all of you will be fine with x86. Okay? So click download. It's a relatively big file. This is again goes back to the whole idea of do this like when you're getting ready to eat, so you can just keep coming checking back on it or something like that, or before you go to bed at night. Depending on your internet speed, it might not be something ridiculous, but I think if I click on this guy, does it tell me what the download size is? Yeah, it's going to start the download. Yeah, I don't see the size necessarily, but you could tell it's not tiny, right? So let it cook for a little bit, all right? But once it's downloaded, then you'll see it on the list like I have here, All right, so choose x86. Just get one of the newest API levels. The newest is fine, but if for some reason you don't have the latest, greatest one up here, that's okay. Just get something newer than 17 or newer than 15 that is running x86, because that you'll have the best compatibility available with that. So then you'll click next, and you choose your device name and any of these other things. So all this stuff should be fine, just being default. And then you hit finish. All right. And when you hit finish, you'll have a device in here that looks like that. Okay. From there, I usually click use same selection for future launches, but you don't have to. The only difference is whether this pops up. Okay. Notice if you actually have a real Android device, you can hook it into your computer through USB and it will detect it. So you can run your app on your actual device as well. Okay. Just hit OK. I've selected that Nexus 5 guy as my emulator. So it's going to go ahead and launch the emulator. Now, this is the thing where if you had not installed that Haxum thing, H-A, during your initial installation of Android Studio, this will take a long time to run. Does anybody in here have a computer with an AMD processor in it? Okay, you do. I know some students have had some issues with Haxum and AMD. So kind of be prepared for that. You might have to do some Google searching. Otherwise, your emulator will just load more slowly. Are you an Android user?
No.
You're also an iPhone user. Okay. Perfect storm. So do you typically work with some of these other guys in your homework? Sometimes? Okay. You might find that helpful if when you first go through this, the emulator doesn't launch perfectly. It seems to be a very specific series of AMD chips, and I'm not sure which it is. I've had a lot of students never have an issue, but it seems like all issues always have to do with somebody with an AMD processor. So just heads up. But punchline is, you saw it launched pretty quickly, and this is a fast machine. So if your emulator does not launch, it might take a minute to launch or something like that. Okay, if you have Haxum. But if you don't have Haxum, which might be your scenario, then just don't close your emulator. Let it launch the first time. I mean, I'm not kidding when I'm saying it'll take like 20 minutes. It'll be sitting there at the little Android launch screen, and you think it's not doing anything. It is. It's just doing it extremely slowly. Okay, so just go to bed. When you wake up in the morning, commit that you will not close that. All right. It will survive your laptop closing its lid and stuff. You'll be fine. Just do not close it. Otherwise, you'll cost yourself another 20 minutes is what you just did. All right. So there's our Android app running there relatively quickly. Does that make some sense? Okay. So let's see. Let's go ahead and do this just so I have kind of the starter video. Why don't we take just a quick break, like 3 minutes. If you got to run to the bathroom, grab a drink, something like that, go ahead and do it. That way I'll stop this video so you have video number 2 is kind of the get started with Android one, and then video number 3 for tonight will be the get in more in depth. All right, so take 3 minutes, go fill up your drink or whatever, and then come back, and then we can keep trucking like 9:05.